All right, let's jump right in. In this explainer, we're unraveling a modern enigma that honestly just completely defies logic. It is a case that has stumped the absolute brightest minds in British intelligence and law enforcement, and it really exposes some terrifying blind spots within the world's most secure agencies. Today, we're looking at the bewildering death of Gareth Williams. I want you to really think about this for a second. How does a top-tier intelligence spy end up dead inside a padlocked bag in his own bathtub? When you hear the details of this mystery, your mind is naturally going to try to solve it, to find the logic. But as we trace the steps of this investigation, you're going to see that every single logical path just hits a brick wall. So, picture this. It's August 23rd, 2010. We're at 36 Alderney Street in Pimlico, London. Now, this isn't just your average apartment. It's a highly secure top-floor flat used as a safe house for security service staff, sitting barely half a mile from MI6 headquarters. Police arrive to do a routine welfare check on a government employee who just hasn't shown up for work. But what they find inside is this macabre, deeply disturbing scene. In the ensuite bathroom, sitting in an empty bathtub, is a red North Face sports hold-all, and zipped inside that bag are the decomposing remains of a man. That man was Gareth Williams. He was a 31-year-old Welsh maths prodigy. He actually spoke Welsh as his first language, earned a first-class degree in mathematics by the time he was 17, and was brilliant enough to become a codebreaker for GCHQ, that's the UK's signals intelligence agency. At the time of his death, he was on a 3-year secondment to MI6. By all accounts, Williams was an intensely private guy, a really keen cyclist, and someone deeply, deeply embedded in the shadows of highly classified intelligence work. Now, let's walk through his final days, because the timeline here is chillingly tight. On August 11, 2010, Williams returns to the UK from a holiday in the US. 3 days later, on the 14th, he's captured on CCTV at Holland Park Underground Station. That is literally the last time he is ever confirmed alive on camera. Fast forward to the early hours of August 16th, and his laptop is used to log onto a cycling website, which pathologists estimate is his most likely date of death. And then, just agonizing silence. A full 7 days pass before police discover his body on August 23rd. 7 days where a top-tier intelligence operative was missing, and absolutely nobody at his agency raised the alarm. Okay, let's get into the physical evidence, which is where things just stop making sense. These clues completely contradict each other. So his body was entirely naked inside that zipped red North Face hold-all. The bag was padlocked from the outside. Yet, impossibly, the keys to that exact padlock were found inside the bag, resting underneath his body. And adding to the madness here, the heating in the apartment was cranked all the way up, despite it being the middle of August. Investigators scoured the whole scene and found 0 fingerprints on the padlock, the zipper, the bag itself, or even the rim of the bathtub. To top the whole shebang off, there were no signs of a struggle and no signs of forced entry. 400. I want you to just wrap your head around that number for a second. During the investigation, experts were brought in to see if Williams could have, somehow, in any way, zipped and padlocked himself inside this bag from the inside. They made 400 separate attempts to recreate this exact feat in a similar bag. Out of 400 attempts, they failed every single time. The physical reality, it was virtually impossible for him to have locked that bag himself. So, if he couldn't physically lock himself in, what actually happened inside that incredibly tight space? Pathologists had to evaluate the gruesome medical reality of his confinement. They cited hypercapnia, which is a lethal buildup of carbon dioxide in the blood. If Gareth Williams was alive when he was put into that hold-all, experts estimate he would have succumbed to the lack of oxygen and the toxic carbon dioxide within just 2 or 3 minutes. Now, the investigation did uncover some highly unusual, deeply personal details that definitely complicated the narrative. In his flat, police found £25,000 worth of high-end, unworn women's designer clothing, right alongside wigs and makeup. They also noted occasional visits to bondage websites on his computer, though the coroner later clarified this was just intermittent and didn't really indicate an obsession or any broader pornography use. Plus, previous landlords reported that 3 years prior, they had once found him tied to his bedposts, a situation he claimed was just a test to see if he could escape. These kinds of intimate facts fueled massive speculation, really blurring the lines between an espionage hit and a tragic personal accident. But maybe the real tragedy here is what happened, or rather what didn't happen, during those missing 7 days between his estimated death and the discovery of his body. MI6 faced unrelenting criticism for failing to report Williams missing for a full week. Because the heating was inexplicably blasting during a sweltering August,
The decomposition of his body was dramatically accelerated. This staggering institutional delay basically destroyed crucial biological and forensic evidence that might have actually solved this case. Was it a massive blunder, or was it part of a deliberate cover-up? Because of that catastrophic loss of evidence, we're basically left with two completely radically different theories. On the one hand, you have the tragic escapology accident theory. This leans heavily on those personal details police found, painting a picture of a solitary stunt gone terribly, terribly wrong. On the other hand, you have the foreign assassination theory, suggesting he was murdered by operatives due to his highly classified work, with the scene meticulously cleaned by professionals to look like an accident. The glaring problem here? Both of these theories struggle to perfectly align with the bizarre physical facts of the locked bag and a flawlessly wiped crime scene. Now, when you look into his actual day job, that foreign assassination theory really gains some serious weight. This wasn't just a local tragedy. This reached the absolute highest levels of international intelligence. Williams was not a low-level analyst. He worked directly with the U.S. National Security Agency, actively tracing Russian money laundering routes used by organized crime. He was part of a specialized team sent to penetrate U.S. and U.K. hacking networks. He even attended the DEF CON hacker convention. The FBI ran their own completely independent investigation into his death. And perhaps the most telling detail of all, the UK Foreign Secretary at the time explicitly signed a certificate blocking classified details of Williams's joint U.S. operations from ever being revealed at his public inquest. This whole international spy angle, it was heavily fueled by some pretty wild claims from people like Boris Karpyshkov, a former KGB defector. Karpyshkov alleged that the Russian SVR tried to blackmail Williams into becoming a double agent, and when Williams flat-out refused and threatened to expose a Russian mole, Karpyshkov claims he was exterminated, using an untraceable poison introduced directly into his ear. Now, while this is completely unproven, it really highlights exactly how seriously the intelligence community viewed the shadows surrounding his death. So, where did the official investigations land? Well, amazingly, they arrived at entirely contradictory conclusions, throwing the whole case into a state of bureaucratic absurdity. In 2012, after a really thorough inquest, the coroner delivered a narrative verdict stating the death was unnatural and likely to have been criminally mediated. She firmly believed a third party locked that bag and wiped the scene. But then, just a year later in 2013, the Metropolitan Police wrapped up their own reinvestigation by declaring it was probably an accident. Two official government bodies looked at the exact same baffling evidence, and one claimed murder while the other claimed a solitary accident, totally rejecting those foreign spy theories. Now, you might be thinking, surely modern science has caught up by now, right? Well, jump to 2024. The Metropolitan Police actually concluded a fresh forensic review. Using the absolute latest advances in DNA science, they took a closer look at a single, unidentified hair found at the scene all the way back in 2010. Unfortunately, despite all the leaps we've made in forensic technology over the last 14 years, no new DNA or third-party evidence was found. The physical evidence remains just as silent today as it was the day they opened that bag. Which really just leaves us with this one haunting question. When the forensic evidence completely vanishes into thin air, when there are no fingerprints, no DNA, and zero witnesses, do we trust the logic of a tragic solitary accident, or do we look at a brilliant codebreaker wrapped in a padlocked bag and see the shadow of the perfect, untraceable assassination?